Drawing a cake is way easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So as usual, we're going to start by creating a new canvas. The dimensions are totally up to you depending on your project. For reference, these are the dimensions of my canvas here. There's no reason behind it. This is just a demo, so that's what I usually go with. And if you're not exactly sure what to pick for yourself, I have a video in which I explain everything you need to know in order to pick a canvas size. So I'm going to link that in the annotations and in the description below so you can check it out. And if you want to change your background color, now is a good time to do it. So in Procreate, it's very easy. You just go in your layer panel and click on the background color option right here. So I'm going with this grayish blue, but you could use pretty much any color that you want. I recommend that you keep it a little bit lighter and a little bit more gray, so kind of in the same region as I did. And once you have that done, go ahead and create a new layer and rename it to Sketch. And just so that we can see our lines better, especially since we have a colored background, go ahead and change the blending mode of this layer to multiply. So just click on the little N next to the check mark and select multiply. You can sketch with any color because we're not going to have the sketch in the final product, so pick whichever color you want. I'm just going with gray. And now in this video for the brushes, I'm always going to be suggesting two different options. One is going to be a free brush that comes with Procreate, and the other option is going to be a brush that's going to help you kind of get your illustrations to the next level, get just more professional results and save time. And in this case, it will be the brushes from my Ultimate Illustration Bundle, which will be linked in the description below, along with a special promo code for the YouTube people as usual, but they are optional. You can definitely follow along using the free brushes. So for the sketch, you can either use the HB pencil from the sketching panel, or if you have the illustration brushes, of course, pick the sketching pencil. And again, any color you want. I'm going with gray. And we're just going to start straight away with the edges of the cake, so just two vertical lines, nothing more complicated than that. You're then going to simply connect them to create the bottom and the top of the cake. And you can see here, I'm being really quick, really loose. We just want to have a rough idea of where everything is going to be. You're then going to draw a diagonal line starting from one of the top corners of your rectangle and then connect it with a slightly curved line to the other top corner. You can then map out the different cake layers. So in my case, I want to have 3. So I'm just going to add 2 horizontal lines in the middle, making sure that they're a little bit thicker so that I can draw some frosting in later. Now, you can always use the arrow tool here at the top to move your sketch and put it where you want it to be in your illustration. You can also resize it by making sure that it is set to uniform, or if you want to kind of change the shape a little bit, you can set it to distort and use the blue arrows to stretch your shape in one direction or the other. But again, remember, we're not looking to have something perfect here. We just want to have a rough idea of where everything's going to be. Speaking of which, we have one little element left to draw. So we're going to sketch the candle by drawing a rectangle with a flat oval on top, then a small vertical line for the wick, and for now the flame, you can just roughly sketch it with a circle. And if you want to have 2 colors on your candle, it can be really helpful to sketch out the entire coil around like this. And although we're only going to be using the front lines for the final illustration, it really helps to make sure that the color actually looks like it's wrapping around in a way that makes sense and not just kind of weird random lines. And that was it for the sketch. We don't need anything any more precise, so let's move on to the color. Okay, so we're going to start by coloring in the base cake layers themselves, so like the actual cake. So for that, create a new layer, rename it to cake. And you can really pick whichever color you want for your cake, so whichever flavor you want. I'm going with chocolate cake, kind of 3 different chocolate colors. So just a brown. I'm going to start with a fairly middle brown and then make it darker and lighter later in the process. So something like that, but don't worry, we can always tweak the colors using hue, saturation, and brightness. I'll show you how to do that later, so don't agonize over your color. Now for the brush, you can use either in the airbrushing panel the hard brush right here, And if you've ever watched any of my watercolor videos and follow along, make sure that you up the opacity of the hard brush back to 100% if this is the one that you're using. Otherwise, you can pick in the illustration bundle the base square brush. And like I was saying, we're just going to start with the cake themselves. So for that, I like starting with the inner vertical edge and making it kind of wobbly, because you know, when you cut a cake, it is not a perfect straight line. So the inner vertical edge and the bottom horizontal edge are going to be wobbly, but then the outside and top edges can be straight lines. So you can just draw a line real quick, hold your pencil on your iPad, and then it's going to allow you to create a perfectly straight line. You can also create perfectly straight lines for the frosting sections in the middle, because we're going to draw some frosting on top, and that's where we're going to add the wobbles. And once your outlines are all finished and connected and there's no gap, you can use autofill to fill in the different layers of your cake. And since I want the layers to have different colors, I want them to not be connected anymore, so I'm just going to use my eraser to kind of erase the outline between the separate layers. Great, so it's going to be really easy to change the colors now. You can just go in your color selector, make your brown a little bit darker, and then just drag the color over the bottom layer. Then making the same thing, but this time making your brown a little bit lighter than the original and dragging that color over the top layer. And you can really create different combinations here. I'm just going with chocolate, but you can have a rainbow cake, a funfetti cake, anything that you want. So once you have your cake base, go ahead and create a new layer above the cake layer and rename it to frosting. So on this layer, we're going to draw the layer of frosting between the cake layers. So not the top, really just kind of the two little horizontal lines. And I'm going with bright pink just to make the cake look more exciting, but you can go with whichever color frosting you want. And for the brush, you can stick with the hard brush, or if you have the illustration bundle, go with the base round, since we want something a little bit more curvy here. So the top line of your frosting is going to be not perfectly straight, but not super wobbly either. Then the front might kind of bulge out a little bit, kind of like the frosting might be melting, or like there's too much in it and it's just kind of drooping. And the bottom line, that's where you're gonna get some frosting drooping. You don't want it to fully be melting and dripping, but it is nice to kind of get some curvy lines drooping towards the bottom to make it feel like it's oozing out of the cake, like there was so much frosting in the cake that it's just getting everywhere. So outline the 2, 3, 4, how many frosting layers you have, and then just fill them in with the color. And if you're not fully happy with the color, that is totally fine. Make sure you have the frosting layer selected, and then go in the magic wand menu here, select hue, saturation, and brightness for the entire layer. With that, you're going to be able to change the color to whatever you want. So this is the beauty of drawing separate elements on separate layers. You can change the colors really easily. So that way you don't have to agonize over creating a color palette. You can kind of make it as you go. So I'm going to stick with this pink here, but feel free to experiment until you get something that you like. And once you have something you like, we're going to move on to the top layer. So I'm naming it ganache because I'm imagining I have chocolate that is melting all over my cake, but you can rename it to frosting 2 or something like that. So here I'm just going to go with a darker version of my brown, again just pretending I have a bunch of really nice melted chocolate on top of my cake. And with the same layer you used for your frosting, you're going to outline this top layer here. So you want it to be kind of smooth, but not perfectly straight either. Again, we're drawing food. Food is not perfectly straight or perfectly curvy. There's some wobbly stuff happening, including here at the bottom. As you can see, since I have melted chocolate, I'm pretending that is kind of pulling at the base of the cake. So I'm just drawing a little bit more towards the bottom of the trip. And what's going to be really interesting and really kind of bring this cake together in terms of making it look so much more appetizing is this drippy edge here. So just go ahead and draw this edge with really wobbly lines, crazy little waves and drops and drips, and just make it look like this chocolate is melting all over your cake. I personally think it's a little bit tricky to see how good or bad this looks, so I like to just fill in my outline as quickly as I can or as soon as I can, and then going in and fixing the drips so that they look good, because right now they look a little bit wonky. Some edges are too pointy, they're not right. So I highly recommend that you do the same. So starting really quickly, just kind of outlining roughly, and then moving in with both your eraser and your paintbrush tool to kind of fix the shape, fix the drips so that it looks super appetizing and just so chocolatey. So feel free to pause the video here to take all the time you need to make this look really, really good, and we'll meet at the next step. Okay, so the last little thing that we have to do before moving on to adding details and shading is drawing the candle. So create a new layer above the ganache, call it candle, and you can pick whichever color you want for the candle. Here it's totally up to you. You can pick your favorite color. I'm just going to go with a cream for the base, and I recommend you do the same, and then we're going to move on to adding the colors in just a few seconds. But for now, just kind of outline the candle, really the same technique that we've been doing for the last 8 minutes or so. So just the outline. Once you have your outline, just fill it in, and seriously, that's it. You might want to add some drips on your candle as well to pretend that the wax is melting. Something just like this is good enough. Now, look at this magic trick. If you use 2 fingers and swipe towards the right on your layer, it's going to activate Alpha Lock. If it's not working for some reason, you can just activate Alpha Lock by tapping on a layer and selecting it in the layer menu. And with Alpha Lock activated, everything we're going to draw on this candle layer is now going to stay within this cream colored shape that we have. So that's super helpful. I'm just going to go with a white and yellow candle. So I'm just going to pick a orangey yellow. And like you're probably guessing it, you're just going to fill in these little, not swirls, but little sections with your secondary color. And I say secondary color, but again, like the layers of the cake, you could have as many colors as you want in your candle, but I think 2 looks good. Now note here, you cannot use color drop when you have Alpha Lock. It's just going to change the color of your entire candle, so you have to fill in these sections by hand, which should not be too hard because they're fairly small. And don't forget to make sure that the drips are the same color that is on top of the candle, because that's what would happen if the wax was actually melting. And before we move on to adding the details, I want to tell you a little bit more about the giveaway. So since the channel is turning 1 year old in just a few days, I thought I want to give you guys something. So 3 lucky winners are going to be able to pick any of my brush sets on my website, and I'm going to send it to them for free. So the way to enter is really simple. If you've watched more of my videos, you know that at one point there's going to be a secret password somewhere on the screen. To enter the giveaway, all you have to do is comment that secret password on YouTube, just right here on this video, and on Instagram as well, on the post that is going to look like this, so the post about the cake tutorial. The official rules will all be in the description. They're mostly legal stuff to make sure I don't get sued, because that's not nice, but seriously, it's super simple. I'm going to announce the winners on July 13th, so in just a few days. I'm going to announce them on Instagram in my story, so make sure you have subscribed so you don't miss that. And if you're watching this video and the giveaway has already ended, don't worry, I'm going to be doing more in the future, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well so you don't miss the videos when they come out. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for the secret password, and we're going to move on to adding the details. First thing I like to do here is grouping all the cake layers, because we're starting to have a few and it's just going to keep our file organized. So to group your layers, just swipe them towards the right and then click group on the top. You're going to be able to rename your group. I'm just going to rename it to cake. Nothing more complicated than that. You're then going to create a layer on top of your candle layer and rename it to details. So I'm going to be drawing all my outlines on this layer here because I know I like my color palette. If you're not exactly sure of your color palette yet, you can create a detail layer above the cake, above the frosting, above the ganache. So basically separate details layer with separate colors on them. So you could use hue, saturation, and brightness for your details too. Here I'm just going to go with a dark brown to start with a ganache, and for the brush you can use either the 6B pencil in the sketching panel, or if you have the illustration bundle, pick the outline brush. And all we're going to do, very simple, we're going to outline the shape that we already created, so this should not be too big of a deal. Make sure here that you keep your wrist lock. So you want to try and move your whole arm as opposed to just your wrist. That way you're going to get smoother curves and lines that are way more alive, if that makes any sense, and less stiff. Another really important tip for that is to try and draw lines without erasing. So if you draw a line and you don't like it, don't just erase a little section of it and then restart. That's going to create really stiff lines. Instead, just go ahead and undo. So you can see here, I just did an undo and then started over again. That might seem like it's going to take forever, but trust me, it actually usually ends up being quicker than erasing a little section, redrawing the little section, erasing, redrawing until you get something that you like. And you're just going to get better results in the end. So even if it takes a little bit longer, which it doesn't, I think it's definitely worth it. So once you're done with that, we're going to do the outlines for the cake layers themselves. So still on the detail layer, you can hide your sketch by now. You're going to pick one of the color layer. I like to pick the darkest one and then just make it slightly darker. And there's really no secret here, you're just going to outline your cake layers as well. So I personally really like to make sure that there's a lot of wobbles and little nooks and crannies. Well, not necessarily nooks and crannies, but make it look like the cake is a little bit crumbly and not perfectly straight. It just looks more appetizing and more cartoonish, at least in my opinion, that way. You might also want to add even more texture by drawing little circles and little dots in your cake layers. So in groups of 2 or 3 and some little random ones here and there, that's going to make your cake just look a little bit more interesting. And you can see as well here, I'm not outlining the horizontal lines between the cake layers. That's going to be outlined in the color of the frosting, which is what we're going to do just now. So color pick your frosting color, make it slightly darker. By now you should be an expert at these steps, not super difficult. And yeah, you're just going to outline the frosting. So don't forget, in the middle section of your cake, like the pointy edge of your cake, there's going to be a little bit of a droop. Then the bottom of your frosting layer is also going to be drooping in some areas, but the top of your frosting should be a little bit smoother. So we're kind of pretending, like I was saying earlier, that there's so much frosting that is just oozing out the sides, which means the top layer is going to be fairly smooth, but the bottom is going to be oozy woozy, droopy frost thingy. And once you're done with your frosting, you can probably imagine what we're going to do next. We're going to do the same things, but for the candles. But for the candle, I do like creating a separate layers just so that we can easily move the candle around on the cake. So just create a new layer, rename it to candle details or something like that. And really, it is going to be the exact same technique. So color picking one color, making it darker, and then just outlining your shape. So I like to outline both the outside of the candle and also kind of the swirls. That totally is a personal preference. You can leave the swirls not outlined, but I just like doing it. And I forgot to do it. I'm going to do it later in just a few seconds, you're going to see, but don't forget to also draw the wick on this details layer. So you can just use the same color as you use for the outline to draw the little vertical line. Now you can see if we select both our candle and candle detail layer, we can use the arrow tool to move them around, but the order of the layer is not right. So just make sure that your candle is above the cake details layer, which means now whenever we move both the candle layer and the detail layer, it's gonna work just fine. So you can adjust the position of your candle, and once you're happy with it, we're actually going to move on to adding really cool details. But as you can see now, there's when I'm drawing the wick. So this is what it should look like. Okay, and we're going to start adding the sprinkles to make this cake look so much brighter and more fun. So create a new layer, put it below the candle but above the details, and rename it to sprinkles. Now I'm going to draw all the sprinkles on one layer with the outlines on one layer as well, but you can draw on a bunch of different layers if you want. Just feel like for this is kind of more detailed stuff, so it is not necessary. And I'm gonna start with the same yellow as I used on the candle, but here for the sprinkle, you can really use any color palette of your choice. But don't worry, I'm going to give you some tips on how to make sure all your color are harmonious. So once you have just a few sprinkles that are the same color as your candle, you can make it a little bit lighter and then color drop on some of the sprinkles to add some variation. And then opening the color menu, you can go in harmony here on the bottom. And you're going to see you have this color wheel here. And you have a few options if you click on the word below color. In my case, I'm just picking tetradic. Now you're going to get a few options shown to you on the color wheel, and any option that you pick is going to be a color that is going to work well with what you already have. So here I'm just going with the blue that was suggested to me. And I'm just, again, coloring a few sprinkles. And once I'm happy with it, I'm going back and making the color slightly lighter again, just to get some variation in my sprinkles really easily and really quickly. You can also use the color that you used for the frosting as a sprinkle color. That way it ties in your cake a little bit better. So I'm just going in with some pink, and you can really draw whichever shape you want for your sprinkles. Here I'm just going with some organic blobs, but you can have, you know, stars, hearts, or the more elongated like donut sprinkles. And I'm just going to use the harmony tool once more. This time I'm going to pick the grain that is recommended to me and add just a few final sprinkles on top of the cake. And you can have as many or as few sprinkle colors as you want. Here I'm going with I want to say funfetti, but it's not funfetti because usually the sprinkles for funfetti would be inside the cake, not outside. I'm just going for like a rainbow sprinkles, but you can have a more muted color palette. You can even have dark brown to have kind of chocolate sprinkles. And once you have your base sprinkles, you can outline a few of them. I like to just outline the bigger ones. And since this is already like in the details and fairly small things, I literally just go in on the same layer and outline my sprinkles with a darker version of the colors. So just go ahead and outline your bigger sprinkles as well. Honestly, you could skip this step if you wanted to. I think it's, you know, it's not necessary, but it does make it look good, especially for big sprinkles. Definitely not necessary for small sprinkles, but it just kind of is a nice little touch to add. Speaking of which, there's also another trick that I want to give you to add a little bit more texture in your cake really easily, and that would be to create a new layer above the cake layer and renaming it to crumbs. Now this layer, we're going to apply it as a clipping mask. So to do that, tap on it and click clipping mask in the menu. So basically now everything we're going to draw on this crumbs layer is going to stay within the shape of the cake layer. If you want to learn more about masks, I have a video about it in which I explain everything you need to know. I will link it in the description below. But for now, let's just change the blending mode of this crumbs layer to screen and lower the opacity somewhere around 35. You're also going to color pick the lighter version of your cake, and you're then just going to add some little ovals here and there to kind of add a little bit more texture and make your cake look more airy and crumbly and moist. I know you're not supposed to say moist on the internet. People don't like that word, but you know what? For cake, I think it's fine. So just go ahead and add some little ovals, and seriously, nothing more complicated than that. Again, in groups of 2 or 3. And then we're just going to tweak the opacity because right now it looks way too intense. So going back into layers, just playing with the opacity until we get something that we like. This is going to depend on your color and just on the cake that you've drawn in general. And you can also experiment and try different blending modes. I'm going to stick with screen, but you can move around in the list and find something that you might like more than screen. That is totally fine. I really encourage you to try stuff for yourself. And we're almost at the point to start adding some shading and just lighting, which is going to make everything look so much better. Right now it is super flat, but we're going to add a little bit of a background texture first. So create a layer below your cake group and rename it to background. I like to just go with BJ. I think it's just quicker. And we're going to set the blending mode, this one, to add. You can pick just pure white or any other color of your choice, but I think pure white looks good. I don't want to draw too much attention to the background either, because really all we want to do is add a little bit more texture and dimension. So for that, I'm really just drawing some sprinkles and some dots, nothing complicated. And it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and comment with your favorite type of cake. And if you want to enter the giveaway, which I was talking about earlier in the video, make sure that you comment both on YouTube and on Instagram on the cake post. And I know the secret password thing might seem a little bit strange if you're new on the channel, especially when there's no giveaway, but it's so great because it gives me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better, but also it's really great because you guys know me, but I don't know you. And whenever you leave a comment, I get to see your name, sometimes even your face, and it's just so cool to see the wonderful creative community that we're building here on the channel. So just go ahead and leave a comment with your favorite type of cake, both on YouTube and on Instagram if you want to enter the giveaway, and we'll keep going. So once you have all your sprinkles, you can go back and change the opacity of your layer. You can play with the blending modes as well until you get something you like. In my case, I'm sticking with add and I'm lowering the opacity around 20%. And with that done, we're ready to move on to shading. So for the shading, we're going to start with the cake layers themselves. So opening back your cake layer group and then creating a new layer. You can delete your sketch layer, by the way, by now. But yeah, creating a new layer above the crumb layer and applying it as a clipping mask and also renaming it to shadows. You're going to change the blending mode of this layer to linear burn. So again, just clicking on the N right here and picking linear burn. For now, you can leave the opacity around, 35% or something like that, but you can always come back and tweak it later. For the color, I like to use a grayish purple pinkish color just so that it doesn't look as flat and dead as if I was to just go with a pure gray. And you can use either the 6B pencil brush from the sketching panel or the basic texture brush from the illustration bundle. And all we're doing here is really quickly adding some shading in the bottom right corner of our cake. So you can see it is also going to help build the crumb texture and making the cake feel a little bit less flat overall. You don't need to spend a whole lot of time here, this should just take a few seconds. And feel free to go and adjust the opacity like I was saying so that you get something that blends nicely with your color. And then we're going to do the same thing above the ganache, so creating a new layer, applying it as a clipping mask and renaming it to shadows. You're also going to change the blending mode of this layer to linear burn and try to use a similar opacity as you used for the other shadows, so around 30% in my case. And same thing, you're just going to make the bottom right corner of your ganache or your glaze slightly darker. We're also going to add some lights, which is really going to help make everything pop. So to do that, create a new layer just above the shadows layer that you have on the glaze, apply it as a clipping mask and rename it to lights. For this layer, you're going to use the blending mode called add, which is really intense. So you might want to lower the opacity quite a lot, around 30% or something like that for now. And for the lights, I like to go in with a super bright yellow, but we're going to tweak it later. And for the brush, you can keep using the 6B pencil in the sketching panel, or if you have the illustration bundle, go ahead and use the outline brush again. So we're going to outline the glaze first, and since we have a clipping mask, we don't have to worry about, going outside of the color. We can go pretty quickly and pretty loosely. I like to just outline the top part of the cake like this, and then going in and kind of adding a secondary highlight in the top corner. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, so make sure you look at the video to see what I'm doing. It's very simple, nothing complicated here. It's just a little bit hard to describe for some reason. So that's really going to help your cake pop from the background. But what's really going to look the best is adding some highlights on the little ganache drips. So to do that, I like to just focus them mostly on one side of the drip. So in this case, I'm going with the left side. So you're just following along, adding some highlights here and there until you reach the outside edge. And which you need to also add a few highlights. Don't overdo it though. Mostly focus them on the pool of ganache that is kind of accumulated at the bottom of the cake. One little thing you can do as well is add extra little lights on the bigger drops. So kind of zooming in and just adding one or two little dots can kind of make it feel like the drops are bigger and rounder and fuller and more delicious. We're also going to be adding some highlights on the frosting. So creating a new layer above the frosting, applying it as a clipping mask and renaming it to lights. Don't forget to change the blending mode of this layer to add as well. So clicking on the N, picking add and lower the opacity again, roughly where it was before. So around 30% or something like that. And you're just going to do the same thing. So adding little highlights on the bottom part of the frosting layer. So you can also go back and add a little extra highlights, so the little dots. But here, think of this frosting as a thicker paste, so it is probably not going to droop quite as much. You're probably not going to get as much like round highlights, basically. And the last highlights we need to add before moving on to the candle flame is on the candle itself. So create a new layer above the candle layer below the candle details, apply it as a clipping mask, rename it to light, change the blending mode to add, lower the opacity around 30%. You're an expert by now, you know what to do, and you're just going to outline kind of the sides of the candle and also the top, because when you think of it, the flame is going to light up the top of the candle, so you want to add some lights there as well. And with that, we're ready to move on to animating the flame. So we're simply going to start by drawing one version of the flame. So creating a new layer that is above your cake group. That is very, very important. You want to create a layer that is outside of your cake group and is sitting on top of it. And this layer, you're going to rename it to flame. We're also going to use add as the blending mode, but this time leaving the opacity at 100%. And we're just going to use the same color that we used for the highlights, so a super bright yellow. And you can simply start by drawing a circle for the base of the flame and then add a little flick on the top. Now there's a lot of things to talk about with animations. We're not going to get in a lot of details in this video, but you're going to be able to animate your flame really easily and quickly, I promise. So the first thing we need to do in order to be able to animate this is to have the animation menu open. So going in your wrench icon menu here at the top in the canvas, select animation assist and activate it. Your canvas is probably going to look all weird, but don't worry, this is fine, we're going to fix it. And if we click play, you're going to see it is just kind of flicking through all of our layers. So animation in Procreate works kind of like a flip book on which every page would be your different layers or different group of layers. So we're going to organize our group of layers differently. First of all, we're going to group our texture background and the cape background in one group and rename this one to still, which is going to be what is not moving in our animation. And you want to make sure that this still group is the lowest group possible, so right above the background color. So now if we click on the cake vignette here, we can activate background, which means the cake is going to stay still as the background of our animation. So we're now going to add another page to our flipbook above the flame layer. We're basically going to create a new flame layer with the exact same settings, and you can see it adds a little vignette in the bottom. So rename this new layer to flame. You can call it flame 2 if you want, it doesn't really matter. Making sure that it is also set to add. And don't worry if the flame on the other layer looks all transparent and weird, that is normal. That is just something that Procreate does to help you animate easier. That is not going to show up in the final product. And it might look different for you. So open up your settings here and go to onion skin frame in the middle here. And you want to make sure that it is set to 2 and that your opacity is somewhere around 25%. So basically that just shows you the other pages of your flipbook and transparency so that you can draw over them and have an animation that is coherent. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to draw a second, slightly different version of our flame. The base should be pretty much the same. It's just kind of the flick at the top that should be kind of the opposite direction. So now if we click on play, we can see that it just alternates between the two little flames and that the cake stays still in the background. So we're going to create a third flame above the second one. Same thing, new layer, renaming it to flame. You might want to rename it to flame 3, but honestly, it doesn't matter that much. And making sure that it is also set to add. And you're going to draw again a very similar base to the other two flames, but this time the flick is going to be even more on the opposite side as your first flame. So something a little bit like this. And you can create as many versions of your flame as you want. I'm going to go with 3. I think that's enough for what we need here. And you can see now if you kind of click on your little different frames, the flame is going to move. Now we're going to make it move automatically, of course, but you can kind of that way have a better idea of if you want to tweak anything. So for the way the frame are going to play back, you have a few different options of the order. So the first order is going to be called loop, in which it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. Another option that you can use, which is the one I'm going to use here, is called ping pong. And instead of skipping layers, it's just going to go back and forth. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, and just back and forth. So if we can play, you're going to see this is what we get. You can also change the speed of your animation by increasing or decreasing the frames per second. Frame per second is a little bit more complicated than that in general, but here just think of it as the speed of your animation. I'm keeping mine at 3. And that also means that the animation we've created here is going to last 1 second because we have 3 frames at 3 frames per second. And this is very important because if you want to export your video for Instagram, it needs to be at least 3 seconds. So how do you do that? You just select all your layers by swiping them towards the right and then just dragging them over the canvas, which is going to duplicate them. And you're going to do that until you have the equivalent of 3 seconds at least. You can do it as many times as you want. Again, just kind of selecting your layers and duplicating them like this. And once you have enough layers to create enough seconds, here I have plenty. I have like 5, 6 seconds. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember. You're going to see the animation is going to be the same, but when we export it, the video is going to be longer, which is going to allow you to use it on Instagram. And to export it, you just click on the wrench icon menu here at the top, click on share, and then in the bottom, you're going to click on animated MP4. You can change the frames per second here as well, but you're better doing it in the animation settings themselves. And then all you have to do is click on export here at the top, and you're going to be able to save the image or the video in your photo app. And if you want to learn how to do more simple animations like this, I highly recommend you check out this video in which I'm going to teach you how to draw a teacup with animated steam. So just click on the link right here, and I'll meet you there.